Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 46 of the Godzilla Wins Saturday Pick Show on this lovely Saturday morning, June 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Jack Fredericks, editor of GodzillaWins.com. I'll be doing the show solo this week without Nate Perry or my father, John Fredericks, who are both on assignment this Saturday morning. We are going to be joined with our esteemed panel of perfect sports predictors throughout the Godzilla Wins universe for this next 90 minutes. Our fight guy and senior South Florida lifestyles editor, Patrick Assalone, will be with us to break down UFC Fight Night Jacksonville. Senior MLB contributor Dan Angel will join us a little bit later, along with Beard Vet's own Sean George, to talk the Men's College World Series. Been extremely exciting. We'll be joined by America's Sheriff David Clark and our senior NBA contributor, James Tillman III, to break down the NBA draft. And then we'll wrap up with some baseball. This is the Godzilla Wins Saturday Pick Show, and it starts right now. Okay, Patrick, we're here to talk UFC Fight Night. We got 3 fights I want to talk about. First and foremost, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for asking, Jack.
You're welcome. I'm super excited for this fight night for a couple of reasons. One, I always kind of like when the UFC leaves the Apex in Las Vegas when it's not a huge fight or a huge card, because it just, it adds a little bit more excitement. And I think that, as we were talking a little bit before the show, Emmett versus Topuria, the main event, is going to be a really interesting, really exciting fight because Josh Emmett is so much fun, and so is Topuria, the rising star. We're also going to talk a little bit of Amanda Ribas and Maycee Barber in about 10 minutes. But before that, I want to talk Austin Lane versus Justin Tafa. This is not a main event, but it's right before the Ribas Barber fight. And usually right now, Patrick, what we do is we'll do sort of our favorite fights for the undercard. But I wanted to just scrap that and do the Lane versus Tafa heavyweight fight, because I find these two kind of very fascinating UFC fighters. Austin Lane is making his debut after Dana White's Contender Series, and Justin Tafa is coming off back-to-back knockout wins. Lane is a former defensive end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's probably why he's making his debut here in Jacksonville, I would imagine. If I was a Jaguars fan, I'd be super pumped to watch Austin Lane make his debut at 12-3. And then Justin Tafa is a former rugby player whose brother, Junior Tafa, is also in the heavyweight division. And one of the weird things that sort of happened was Lane was supposed to fight his brother, Junior, a couple months ago. That fight got scratched because of injury. Now Justin Tafa stepping in. So just a lot of sort of weird backstory that you don't always get with the MMA. And I like to watch these. These fighters who are from different sports convert over to MMA, because it's such a MMA so interesting in that way that you can start this a little bit later in your life. A lot of these fighters are maybe past their quote unquote prime in other sports and can be surging at the right time in their prime in MMA, because it's an art form, not necessarily a sport, at least in my opinion. So for the Lane versus Tafa fight, this heavyweight battle, what do you see here?
Well, first and foremost, I've got an affection for Jacksonville. I won the WEF World Lightweight Championship Jacksonville in 2003. Loved the town, loved the place. I was very excited to see that Jacksonville was going to get a fight of this caliber, because, as we were talking about before, that main event's going to be a freaking shootout. But Lane versus Tafa, and you're absolutely right. Age, and we've spoken about this many times, to me is not that great of a deal in fighting. Injuries are a much, much bigger problem versus age. Absolutely is Lane here because he is a name known in Jacksonville. Yes. I don't think he's fought the caliber of competition that Tafa has, even though Tafa has fewer fights. So this is a very strange situation where Lane may have more fights, but Tafa has more experience with bigger names. So that's also something to keep into consideration. I think Lane is extremely athletic. The guy's huge. He's 6'6", about 240 pounds. He could probably reach you from across the cage without even coming out of his side. So that's got that would generally carry a lot of weight with me. but I see Lane as being a little spastic and erratic. He may make a mistake, get a little bit too excited, and Tafa will knock your freaking head off. So a lot of people sit there and say, well, you know, Tafa's flat-footed. He doesn't move very well. Maybe that's just not his style. Maybe he's just waiting for you to walk into his guns, and when you do, he takes your head off. He's very big. He's very strong. He hits like a freight train. I think, and this is just my opinion, I think maybe Lane will be a little bit too hyped up fighting in front of his home crowd, step into something and regret it. I don't see it going to the ground.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you when it comes to Lane for a couple reasons. One, we talk a lot about octagon shock. This is a huge fight for him. Now, on the flip side, you know, he's a former NFL athlete, so he's used to the big stage, but this is a little bit different. And you don't usually see guys who are making their sort of octagon debut at the UFC anyway, not at the Contender Series, step into a fight that is this anticipated. I mean, this is like the third fight right before the two co-main events. So it's the first fight right before the two co-main events. This is a huge fight for both these guys. So it will be interesting to see how Lane kind of reacts and what his strategy is. Both of these guys like to knock you out. So it'll be interesting to see also kind of their strategies as far as striking goes. Can either of them, will they be interested in getting to the ground? Are they just going to stand there and bang? I mean, what do you think? Is this something where we're looking for a knockout in the first or second round between these two heavyweights?
I think for both of them, it would behoove them to stand up for multiple reasons. And the reason being, they're both better standing up than they are on the ground. But I think for their longevity in the UFC, you put on a really entertaining fight, you get more fights. Okay. And also something that you were talking about, the octagon shock. This is on a big ABC television too. This is not just ESPN. And I don't mean to say just ESPN. Okay. This is on big ABC. So now you've got an enormous amount of press, publicity, interview. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff. And when you say, you know, he's been in front of, you know, obviously tens of thousands of people playing in the NFL, that's one thing. When you're in a cage where everyone is focused on you, it's an entirely different story, because I can guarantee you there's a ton of pressure that he's putting on himself to perform, which is not necessarily a great thing. To me, I think they both stand up. I think they bang, and I'm taking Tafa in this fight.
Yeah, I'm taking Tafa too. On DraftKings, he's -195. So he's a favorite, but you know, sometimes the MMA or the UFC, you'll see favorites at -450, -380. So to me, -195 is a favorite, but not exactly like a super heavy favorite. And that's because he's just more experienced. Like you said, Lane has 15 fights, but he doesn't have any fights in the proper UFC, whereas Tafa does. And not only that, he's got 2 back-to-back wins with back-to-back knockouts. He's going to be very aggressive here. And I'm just not sure that Lane is going to be able to respond quickly enough to Tafa's aggression. Well, that was fun.
Not sure what that was.
So for everyone on listening on the radio or on Getter, the way we tape the show is through Zoom. And so if you've ever been on Zoom and you've had someone accidentally unmute in a way where they're kind of feeding into a different system, then it'll create that sort of feedback. So that's what happened. As my father would just say, technical difficulty. We've had stuff like that happen in the past, but that's where that comes from. So no worries there. I'll kind of put a bow on the Tafa Lane situation here. So I think we both like Tafa, more experienced fighter, -180. Like I was saying, from a betting perspective, you might want to think about the under 1.5 rounds. I mean, it's -215, but I think that there's probably a possibility that if you think that Lane has a shot, they're probably both going to try to knock each other out in the first round. So, you know, that's another situation. I don't think that either of these guys are going to stand there for the first round and kind of feel each other out.
Yeah.
Although, you know, you see that before, but you don't always see that with heavyweights. One of the things I like about watching heavyweights is they tend to just go right after each other. Those fights don't last nearly as long as some of the other weight classes where they're a little bit more, I guess, fleet of foot, maybe. The heavyweights just, you can tell they want to hit each other and they want to do it quickly because that's how they win fights is, they land those big knockout punches.
And that's how you get fight of the night bonuses. Absolutely.
Which is, that's a huge consideration for these guys. Although this is going to be a difficult way to get, this is going to be a difficult card to get those fight of the night bonuses with Emmett and Topuria.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. So Patrick, one thing we want to do before we move on, we want to talk about targettrading.co and your win and loss total, because as we say on the Godzilla Wins show, you want to make all your money with Patrick on Monday through Friday so you can lose it with Jack on Saturday. So what's the win loss total this week for target trading?
And we had a short week because Monday was a holiday. So we went 49 wins, 10 losses, 3 break even. Now, so everybody understands where I'm coming from with this, Jack. These are my students taking the trades that I'm calling out the day before. So everybody would expect me to get into the room on the projection and say, okay, let's take it here. No, these are people who are taught a method, making decisions for themselves, what's in their best interest, and they're taking the entries. Now, 49 wins doesn't mean 3 people took 17, the same trades. No, each one of these wins is an individual win. So let's say out of those 49, one of them, there may have been 9 students that took the same entry. That's only 1 win. We count every loss as a loss. I don't count every winner, say the trending entries, the gap fills, because I did not call those levels out the day before. So these are levels that you're using the day before. Nobody else in the business does this. If you'd like to learn how to trade futures, just come see us on our Facebook page, Target Trading Academy, or targettrading.co. Make an appointment, see if this is for you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. And you can also call 888-203-3731. That's 888-203-3731. There's a lot of ways to invest in your financial future. But when you're talking about trading futures, you have to have an education in this. You have to have someone walking you through it because it's complicated. It's not easy. It's not, when I've said this before, it's not like buying, a blue chip stock saying, well, I have an iPhone, I'll buy a bunch of Apple stock and watch it appreciate over the next 10 or 15 years. Futures takes a lot more skill, and it takes someone who's very practiced at it to help you learn how to do it. And once you learn how to do it, you can unlock your financial freedom and be your own boss in that way. So go to targettrading.co. That's targettrading.co to learn more about that. We always want to thank Patrick for his support of the Godzilla Wins show and for his expertise in the UFC and in MMA. So Patrick, we want to talk about Amanda Ribas versus Maycee Barber for the next about 5-10 minutes. This is the co-main event in, I believe they're the flyweight division, though I don't have that in front of me, but I believe that's where Ribas and Barber fight from, or will be fighting from in this fight. Barber, trendy underdog here. She's on a 4-fight win streak, whereas Ribas, who we've talked about before on the show, has been kind of up and down. Barber's well-rounded. She's scrappy. She can switch stances from southpaw, although so can Ribas. So that's kind of evens each other out. What in this co-main event between a pretty salty veteran in Amanda Ribas and a really, really strong and exciting up-and-comer in Maycee Barber, what do you see here that you like?
Well, I think that Ribas is better in everything, except moving forward and applying pressure, which can absolutely throw you off your game. It can wreck your night, because if you're not setting and throwing and constantly having to move around, your rhythm gets destroyed and you really can't get in your fight. Now, Barber, yeah, she's got a lot of pressure. She comes forward. That can also be a bad thing, because if Ribas is trained to counter strike and let her just keep coming and pick her apart, this is going to be a very, very long night for Barber. I just think Ribas is better at everything. And what you say about being a salty veteran, a lot of veterans fight to their competition. So they can look bad fighting people that are not necessarily on their level because they just don't have to put the work in. I think if somebody like Barber starts to put some pressure on, Ribas wakes up and starts throwing bombs, and I think it may not be a great night for Barber.
So if you watch Barber fight, like I said before, she likes to fight from the southpaw position. She likes to use leg kicks. Like you say, she's very quick on her feet. She's aggressive. She's going to try to push Ribas into a corner. My issue here with Barber is not on her feet because she's strong on her feet. I mean, she's got heavy hands. She lands some shots. Like Ribas will feel those shots. You'll start to see, the blood start to pool around the head. All that stuff is kind of Barber's bread and butter. But my issue is when they get to the ground. And I think that while Ribas can stand up and bang, because like you said, it's not like she's a mess when she's on her feet. She's strong. She's really good. But she's really good on the ground. And Barber just isn't as comfortable when you get to the mat. And I think that most likely, if I was Ribas, I would let Barber tire herself out in the first round. This is a huge fight for Barber, a co-main event for an up and coming star who's going to have a good career in the UFC, but this is a big event for her to basically challenge for the belt at some point. So if I'm Ribas, I say, okay, let me dance around. Let me take some shots from her and tire her out. And then in the second round, let me try to put some pressure on her legs and get her to the ground. Because once she's on the ground, it's going to take a lot for her to get up. Ribas is very strong on the ground. And if she can get on her back, it'd be over in 10 seconds.
Well, I see what Barber's fighting style is. She's on the gas all the time coming forward, which is awesome. The problem with that is when you're dealing with people who are better on the ground than you are, overcommitting, stepping forward like that constantly sets you up to getting taken down. Okay. So, for example, you've heard me on the show say many times, I started out as a wrestler when I was a kid. I love the ground game. To me, it's not that exciting because I've just been doing it for so long. And after the first time I got knocked out, I trained stand-up for 2 years, didn't do any ground at all. Now I'd rather stand up and bang because I love it. It's much more exciting. But you get to a point to where you have to look at a fight strategically. I'm just as good as somebody standing up, but I'm a lot better than they are on the ground. Do I really want to stand there and give 50-50, or do I want to sucker them in and put them on their back where they're not nearly as good as I am? So if the game plan has been mapped out correctly, at least what I would do exactly what you said. I would keep backing up. I keep moving around. I would keep having Barber coming in. And then when she overcommits, shoot the takedown, keep her on the ground. I would even not even try to finish this in the first round. If I were Ribas, I would take her down and let her up as many times as I could, because that will wipe you out. It's exhausting if you've never done it before. And that's a tactic to use. I would do that because once Barber blows up, it's over. I don't care who you are. You can be the greatest ground person, the greatest stand-up fighter in the world. The second you blow up, the fight's over.
Well, and just to give Patrick, you kind of a good idea of what Vegas is thinking for this fight. So Amanda Ribas to win by KO, TKO, or DQ is plus 900. Amanda Ribas to win by submission is plus 450. Now, Barber to win by KO, TKO, or DQ is plus 400. Barber to win by submission is plus 1400. So Vegas thinks that the only way for Barber to win here is KO, basically, or TKO. And that the best path for Ribas is submission. So if I'm a gambling man, if that's something that I'm into, which in Mississippi I can't take advantage of this market, but I can do some fantasy stuff. I would probably recommend Ribas to win by submission. I think that's the game plan. I think she's the better fighter, and you get plus 450 because if we're just picking Ribas to win, it's like minus 200. So she's the favorite. And in the UFC, I don't know. It's hard to take favorites all the time because they just, especially, and I don't feel comfortable with that because Barber's just so explosive. She's so aggressive. She loves to fight. That's the other thing I like about Barber. She is smiling like ear to ear before she gets in the ring. She's excited. She's jumping around. Now that can tire you out, can wear you out. This is a big fight for her. Ribas is more of a veteran, but you know, to me, I would imagine Ribas, like you say, first 2 rounds, tire her out, let her get back up, get her back down, let her get back up, then get her on her back and submit her. So my pick here, Ribas to win by submission plus 450, Ribas to win outright minus 200. Seems like you like Ribas as well.
Yes, I'm with you on that one, Jack. And the same bet, actually.
Good. Okay, so let's talk then about our main event, because this is a huge main event between Josh Emmett and Ilia Topuria. Josh Emmett is a veteran in this field, in this weight class, which is, I don't have that in front of me either. I believe it's the featherweight division. So Emmett is a veteran here. Topuria is kind of an up and comer. Emmett is a little bit more experienced in these bigger fights, but Topuria is riding like an 8-game fight win streak or something crazy like that. He's been rising up the ranks in an incredible fashion. Topuria is minus 345. So that's kind of what everybody thinks is going to happen, is that Topuria is going to kind of maybe usher Josh Emmett out of the contender spot in this weight class. What do you see in the Topuria Emmett fight?
I see 2 guys who, if you go back to the Tito Ortiz age of fighting, and he put up his fists one day, he said, this is TNT and this is dynamite, and they're both going to go off in your face. This is what's going to happen tonight. So both of these guys are jackhammers. They throw thunder and lightning standing up. They have absolutely no problem standing in front of each other and throwing bombs. Topuria has a habit of incorporating more body shots into his combinations. So I think he flows levels a little bit better, meaning high and low. So you'll throw something high, throw something low, throw something high. He's got phenomenal upper hooks, which a lot of people don't really classify as a strike. So it's a combination of a traditional hook and a traditional uppercut coming at an angle, and he throws them violently. Emmett, on the other hand, does exactly the same thing. He's got 1-punch knockout power, where I would say Topuria has 2-punch knockout power, or a combination of heavy bombs, knockout power. Emmett can do it with 1 shot. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, I even saw Emmett he knocked this guy out with a jab. Well, yeah, that happens. And the vast majority of the reason people get knocked out is because they get caught with their mouth open. It's not necessarily because somebody throws so hard, they hit them so hard that it just turned the lights out. It's a combination of things: stepping into strikes, your opponent stepping in, the mouth being open, the hands down, the head on a swivel. It's got a lot to do with that. But don't mistake that for one moment for Emmett not having ferocious 1-strike knockout power. Emmett comes from a team who is known, Team Alpha Male, for dominating wrestling. They're awesome wrestlers. They're great takedown guys. They know how to scramble. They know how to get up. I think Topuria's ground game, if you want to say his submission game, may be better, but we haven't seen Emmett really have to use a submission game. So you don't know what he's got in the tank. I think it is going to be a barn burner. Topuria does have an issue with cardio in the 3rd round. We've seen that. We know Emmett has no issue going 5 rounds, and he's got more big time experience. So if you ask me, I'm going to go with Emmett on this one.
So I sort of feel the same way. I agree with you with a couple things as far as the striking goes. So Emmett has, I think, 2 very powerful, very scary sort of ways that he can hit you when you're standing up. The first is that gigantic right hook, which he doesn't swing like violently. It's a very controlled right hook, but it's got a ton of power. And if he hits you and you don't have a strong chin, although Topuria has a fine chin, it's going to be difficult for you to stand up. He also has an elbow that he can use very quickly and very effectively that I've seen him use in multiple fights that can really wear you down, if not knock you out as well. So Topuria's got to be worried about the elbow. Now for Topuria, he, like you say, he's a kind of a combo fighter. Emmett doesn't throw a ton of combinations. I mean, he gets in there, he throws a jab or he throws a right hook, he gets out. He throws an elbow, he gets out. He kind of moves back and forth. He doesn't care if you pressure him because he doesn't mind being kind of in a corner because he's got so much power. But Topuria, he can really hit you with the combination 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and that can be very tiring. And then Topuria is a little bit better on the ground with his grappling, though that's not to say that Emmett is not. And Patrick, I'll let you talk about this a little bit because we were talking about it before the show. When I look at Emmett on the mat, I just kind of get the sense that he doesn't really want to be there. But you were saying earlier that that might not be the case. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. When you have guys who are as skilled as these two are, you know essentially what is coming on the ground. So you're not necessarily trying for submissions so much, especially when you can just grind someone down. So it may not necessarily be that he doesn't want to be there. Maybe he's taking the guy down. Maybe he's wearing him out. I have seen Emmett manhandle people, literally manhandle, one arm, push him down to the ground, just beat them to death strength-wise. But what happens when you go to the ground? If you're on your back, you're now carrying your opponent's weight. That is not a fun place to be, okay? So being on your back or putting someone on their back is also an attack to wear them out. I think Josh Emmett has absolutely no fear about being on the ground. I think he uses it as a tool, especially when you start sweating, when you know you can hit as hard as he can and you can take people down at will. You're not really willing to sacrifice the position that you just worked so hard to get into. You may want to hold on to that position, you may want to grind somebody down, but trying for a submission, especially when you got these other tools that are so superior, it's really not in the cards sometime. May want to just stand right back up and throw again, because if you look at Emmett's fights, he really has absolutely no fear of throwing bombs. So to him, it may just be, look, this is a transition position. I may want to grind him down. I may want to wear him out. We just haven't seen submission attempts from him in mass because he hasn't had to. It doesn't mean he can't do it. He comes from a fantastic team who knows exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and you know the fight that you can kind of watch on YouTube that the UFC has out right now, the free fight, is Emmett versus Burgos. And in that fight, you know, Shane Burgos is very good on his back. He gets up really quickly. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I mean, if you're looking at that fight going like, I don't know, Emmett doesn't really look comfortable on his back. Well, it's like, yeah, but I mean, okay, he was winning that fight, Emmett was, and he knew that. And he knew that Burgos can basically get out of any position unless he's on his stomach. And he does. I mean, at one point, he basically just kicks Emmett off. And that only happens if the person who's on top of you sort of wants you to kick him off. That doesn't happen otherwise. I mean, nobody in the UFC is like that, just a big of a mess as a wrestler. But this should be just a really fun, really incredible fight between two guys who, I mean, I'm surprised to see Topuria at a -345. I think that's way too much juice to lay for two fighters who might not be evenly matched. I mean, Topuria's surging and probably looking for his title shot, but it's just, you get +245 if you like Emmett. And I think we both kind of do, at least I do in that market. I don't know. Seems like you'd like Emmett as well.
Yes, I do. I'm going with Emmett as well.
The other thing I might recommend is the under 2.5 rounds at -220. That's because, like you said, Topuria just doesn't have the 5-round fight cardio in him that we've seen. And these are both pretty aggressive fighters who most likely will find a way to get it done within the first 2 rounds. So this fight, I don't think is going to go all 5. So if you like that, you may want to take that as well. So we want to thank Patrick, as always, for our UFC analysis here. We are very excited for UFC Jacksonville. Should be a lot of fun, and we'll see what Emmett and Topuria have for us in that main event. So we want to thank Patrick from targettrading.co.